Welcome to the God is Not an Asshole podcast. If you are one of the many people done with religious dogmatism, hang on. You might sense transcendence, but your church or other faith community never seem to get off the ground. You realize that honoring your conscience means more than fitting in and keeping hard to explain rules? Hang on. You could probably think of the goodness in your tradition, and you tried your best to save that baby, but there's so much bathwater. Join your hosts, David Norman Moore Jr. in California and Carrie Connolly in New Jersey, who are collaborating to bring on guests who have found life on the other side of fundamentalism. Guests with stories of how they have liberated themselves from beliefs that divide us from each other. None of our guests' narratives are identical, but we hope you'll find something in common with each of them. We invite you to experience our common bond as we all inspire even more of us to embrace the true self.
So today, David and I are absolutely thrilled and so excited to have the amazing Flamy Grant with us today. And I am going to just go ahead and read Flamy's bio from their website. So award-winning and Billboard charting artist Flamy Grant is a shame-slaying, hip-swaying, singing-songwriting drag queen from Western North Carolina. Her 2022 debut record, Bible Belt Baby, reached the #1 spot on the iTunes Christian charts and was nominated for Best Pop Album at the San Diego Music Awards. She is a winner of the 2023 Kerrville Folk Festival New York New Folk competition and a 2023 QueerX Award nominee for Best Drag Artist, a powerhouse vocalist, intrepid songwriter, and irreverent comedy queen. Flamy drags you into a therapeutic theatrical mix of storytelling and song. Armed with a bold lip and a blistering voice, Flamy is brilliant, resilient proof that nothing is sacred, but everything is holy, and shame belongs in the closet. So welcome, Flamy. I'm so glad. David is so glad, I'm sure, as well, to have you today.
Thanks, Carrie and David. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So I first kind of came across you because as we were just chatting about, my friend Heather Lynn, who we're also going to have on this podcast soon, was, I think, performing with you somewhere. And I kind of saw that. But then I am in seminary currently getting my doctorate. And we usually have a week-long intensive class. And somebody is usually responsible for a devotional. And somebody played your song, Esther, Ruth, and Rahab, as the devotional for that day. And it was that song just gave me so much joy and healing in that one song. And so I knew immediately that I wanted to have you come on here. And I thought you would really dig the fact that your song was being used as a devotional in a seminary class.
I love that. I do. That's in particular that song, because, it's the one that also got me disqualified from the Christian category at the Grammys. So, it's nice that it's still making its way into seminaries, even if Christian music won't have it.
Exactly. I love it. I love that. So why don't you go ahead and tell that story? Because that's, I think, a great place to start about how you just got disqualified from the Grammys.
Sure. I am, so the record, we released it in the Christian category, Christian CCM, Christian music. And we also submitted it in that same category to the Grammys, which is a whole process, whole rigmarole I didn't know about until this year, or last year rather. We got some help from some music industry pals who helped me make that happen. And then we kind of just never heard anything. And we weren't Grammy voters, so we couldn't see, we couldn't access the voting system and see where the album landed, or if it had landed, if it showed up in that category. So finally, and we did have a friend who was a voter, and so we asked that friend to, like, hey, would you just check the Christian category and see if Bible Belt Baby is in there? And he was like, yeah, no, I don't see it anywhere. So the date, and at that point I just kind of assumed, well, I didn't make the cuts for some reason. So at that point, I or actually it was a day before the voting ended, and this is the first round of voting. So this is not the nomination, not the people who are nominated. It's actually the voting to be nominated. Mm-hmm. So the day before that round of voting ends, we get a message, or I get a message from someone I had never spoken to, who's a Grammy voter, who was like, "Hey, it's an honor to vote for you in Best Pop category." And I was like, "Hold up, could you tell me a little more about that?" And so she confirmed, that yeah, your album's sitting there, in the category that has Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo and like every pop singers. You're in there, and I voted for you. And I was like, okay. So I go back to my crew, and I was like, hey, so we are up for nomination, just not in the category we submitted in. And at first I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And it was really kind of talking to my friends who were like, no, this is a very big deal. Like it's normal for the Grammys to kind of move albums between categories. But in this case, Christian music as a genre does not define style, right? It's the only music genre that's not about style, it's about content. Every other music genre, folk, Americana, hip hop, R&B, rock, metal, whatever, like they're all defining a style of music. But if you're Christian music, you can be pretty much any style. You just have to, your content has to be Christian, right? And so we got
Never thought about that.
Yeah, we recruited the help of some friends in the media, and ultimately we got Rolling Stone interested in the story. So they were the ones who kind of went to the Grammys and did some investigative reporting and kind of broke the story that like, oh, okay, this Christian drag queen singer, her album was moved out of the Christian category into pop, and the Grammys came back and said, well, the reason is because you use words like, can we say those words on this podcast? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
we are not family friendly.
Yeah, you use words like cock and fuck and snatch, and in Esther, Ruth, and Rahab, it's a song that I crammed a lot of words into that they did not like. So, which is interesting because out of the album, it is the most biblically literate song on the record. It's very much a Christian song. It just had words they didn't like. So the screening committee at the Grammys, it turns out, had moved me, which is a thing they can do, and it's entirely within their right to do that. But it is interesting, of course, that it was not for stylistic reasons; it was for content reasons. So, yeah,
and also moving you into a category, a much larger category, significantly reduced your opportunity for that visibility and to be seen.
Oh,
right?
For sure, yeah.
I mean,
which I don't know. I wasn't in the room. I don't know the conversation, but I have been in rooms like that before, and I can make a pretty educated guess as to why they don't want a drag queen representing Christian music at the Grammys.
What? I don't know what you could possibly mean.
Eric, right? Yeah. So it's an interesting story, and we're gonna submit again with the next record. I've recorded my second album, and it'll come out later this summer, and we'll submit again. And I'm playing ball this time. I've recorded an album that I do not believe they will find any. Well, here's the thing. I believe they will find offensive content, but it will not be the kind of content that they'll be able to discriminate against in terms of
openly.
There's no language, there's nothing like that. But I do think they'll not love the album because it's pretty. It's pretty critical of some of these very institutions.
Yes.
But yeah, so we'll see.
I would love to hear another story. And that is the story of how your song went to number one on the charts, because that is just a beautiful story. that is just one of the best stories I've ever heard. So please tell us that story.
Yeah, as well. Sure. Yeah, a little bit of poetry.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's another one that could get really long, and I'll try to keep this short. But the short version is I played a show with Derek Webb. Derek is, a member of Caveman's Call, which is one of the biggest selling Christian bands of the 90s and 2000s. And Derek invited me out to his album release party. I opened there. We took a picture. That picture kind of got onto the internet and made it in front of some people, namely one person in particular who identifies as a MAGA worship leader, also calls himself a Christian nationalist. Sean Foyt. And Sean did not like this picture, and he tweeted it, and he said, "This is what happens. This is the end goal of deconstruction. You know, drag queens collaborating with Christian musicians," which is an interesting thing for him to say, because Derek is not a Christian musician anymore, does not identify that way. Whereas I did, and I do. You know, that was my music's in the Christian category, so I was the Christian musician in this scenario. But anyway, you know, I didn't.
I just think
really
about that drag queens collaborating with Christians as though they are, you know, default separate categories.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That would be Sean's perspective. He called it the last days. That's what he said. He's like, truly, these are the last days. And I didn't think much of it because I get trolls all the time, and I didn't know who Sean Foyt was. But Derek is the one who kind of pointed it out to me and was like, "Hey, this is the guy who like hosted all those unmasked worship ceremonies in the middle of pandemic, and he's got a massive following, and this could be an interesting conversation to have online." So I just did a quick little reply back, and I was like, "Oh, it's not the end goal, babe. We're just getting started." And he came back and said, "Well, it's a good thing no one listens to you or cares what you do." And I'm a drag queen, so I took that as a challenge. And I decided, you know what? Let's see if people actually are listening. And I asked, you know, on TikTok and my social medias, I asked folks to go stream and download "Good Day," which is a song on my record. The record had already been out for 10 months, so the record was kind of just sitting there, and it had done okay. It had done fine for an independent, you know, debut record, but hadn't made any kind of marks like on a chart or anything like that. So I was like, let's see if we can get "Good Day" to chart, because that would be a cool thing to see a drag queen's face on a Christian music chart. And so we did, and I woke up the next morning and we had bumped up to number 4. And then by the end of the day, we had hit number 1.
Amazing.
So yeah, thank you to Sean Foyt for the lift there and the assist.
Love it. Yeah. Yes.
Every good story needs an inciting incident, right? And that's
it.
That's mine.
It's a great story. It's a great story. And one of the things that I've been doing some reading, and when you went to the Dove Awards and you caught the ire of folks like Matt Walsh, which is, hashtag life goals. And you really just, you made a comment, because some people questioned, like, why bother with this audience? Why do that? But you're saying because of visibility is important, right? So can you talk, and "Good Day" is a lot about that, right? I love that song. I was just singing it in my car with my son. He loves you as well. And that song is about standing up and in the front row, dancing in the front row in a place that previously didn't welcome you. And it's such a beautiful reclamation of self and of belonging, which I think is such a human need and drive. And I think that's why it's such a beautiful song. So can you talk a little bit more about that desire for visibility, or that insistence on visibility of saying, no, I'm going to be seen?
Yeah, absolutely. I just to touch on the Dove Awards real quickly, I didn't know what I would be getting into with that. It really was, I did view that as kind of this exploratory expedition. Like, let's go out there to the Doves, a troupe of queer and affirming and allied people, and we'll buy seats in the nosebleeds and just have a little corner of the room where we can be ourselves and be in attendance at this thing that I was with Semler, who also had a big year in Christian music. Semler was the first out queer artist to ever have a number 1 Christian song on a Christian chart.
Name again?
Semler. Semler. And so we went together and invited our fans to join us if they wanted to. And it's just, anybody can buy a ticket to the Dove Awards, and that's all we did. We paid our entry fee and we got our seats and we just went. And I did, I was talking about that at the time as like, let's go kind of just like be visibly there. Just let's be present. Let's take up space. Let's bring our queer joy. It's not a protest. It's, nothing like that. We just want to go see what this is all about. And I did see what it was all about. And it was really disappointing. It was a really, just kind of a gross night. And as I received it, as I perceived it, very
What
deeply
made it
enmeshed,
gross?
deeply enmeshed with Christian nationalism. It was like, it was woven through speeches. There was this call to, almost a call to arms, about installing Christ as the principal leader in every nation in the world. This backing of, but it was just really, it was that. It was very much that. And I was like, this is a night about artistry and music, and we're sitting here talking about politics and how we can continue to just basically control everyone else's lives by installing ourselves in the government. So it was not a great night. We did have our own little after party afterward that was fun with like the 30 people who came with us, and that was much better. But yeah, this it is very important to me, and that's ultimately why there's a few reasons why I chose to release my album and will do so again with this next record in the Christian genre. And I would say the biggest one is the lesson I learned when I wrote Good Day. And I wrote that song after attending a queer small group at the progressive church I was a part of, where I was actually leading worship at this church at the time, and was just so impressed at that group of people and their commitment to stick around and be visible for the next generation of queer kids coming up in the church. That's a big part of why they all talked about wanting to stay in an institution that is really hard to stay in as a queer person, and doesn't want us and doesn't value us and actively works against us, kind of thing. So I wrote Good Day as a result of witnessing that kind of power from queer people, and that kind of carried through, I think, the whole record, and certainly my intention in releasing it in the Christian genre. I wanted to take up space, to elbow my way in and be like, no, I am here, and you can't keep everything. You've gate kept a lot over the years, but thanks to the proliferation of new technology and our ability to kind of release independent music ourselves and choose a genre ourselves, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put this album where it belongs, in the Christian genre, because that's what it is. It's telling my faith story. It's telling my experience with the church. It's telling my experience with God, and that's why I want to hear it. I want Christians to hear this music, and specifically, I want queer kids who are not out and not able to be out to have a window to see a happy, whole, joy-filled queer life, so that they know that's a potential future for them, right? That's what we didn't have. So many of us who grew up when I grew up and before I grew up, and even now, I think a lot of kids are still so protected from experiencing anything outside the little bubble of evangelicalism. So any way that we can show the truth about what it is to be a queer person in the world, which, yes, it is hard. Yes, we do have to combat a lot of oppression and judgment and those sorts of things, but also our lives are beautiful and worth living. And that's what I want to communicate to queer kids who may feel otherwise. I certainly did growing up. So, yeah.
And so what I'm about to say, I say carefully, because there is the one side of it that I of the part that I'm going to say, but at the same time, I don't want to undermine or take away from everything that you just said about the specificity of your story for queer kids and for queer people and your queer experience, right? I don't want to take away from that. And at the same time, when I hear Good Day, though I am not a drag queen, I am not queer, it resonates with me, right? Because there have been ways that I have been ostracized from the church as a woman, as an ally, as for a lot of different reasons. And I think a lot of people are made to feel, just given atonement theory in general, a lot of people are just made to feel like they don't belong to God, right? That God doesn't want them. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? And so this that's one of the things that I think is so beautiful. And again, I do not wish to reduce by any stretch of the imagination the beautiful queerness that is a part of
Well,
that
and
song.
it doesn't. It doesn't reduce it in any way. And in fact, it should be the least surprising thing in the world that
Mm.
a queer story could resonate across people who don't have queer experience, because
Right.
that is just what human story does. We are all
Yes.
human. We all do go through similar things, and it's been proven over and over again that there is general in the specific, right? Like, we tell the intimate details of our story, we bare soul, we get vulnerable, all of that, and that resonates with people because we're, at the end of the day, like, the components to our stories might change, but we all have the same story. There's just a handful of stories that ever get told, and the different shades, right? Different coloring, that kind of thing. But it's, at the end of the day, we're all kind of having similar experiences. And so no, I don't think it takes away from the queerness at all. I think it's a beautiful testament to the power of story, and the power of being authentic and living your authentic truth. And
go ahead.
Oh, you go. I don't know where I was going next.
Thank you. No, that's okay. My dear friend Cassidy Hall just has a book coming out called Queering Contemplation, and she talks a lot about the way that we can all identify. We're all a little bit queer, right? There's that all of us are a little bit. There's, and she invites us into exploring that, which I think is so cool. And I think your music also does something similar. It invites us into the experience of, and helps us identify our own queerness. And I think that's a really deeply beautiful thing.
Yeah, something that a lot of us are really looking for, we are looking to go beyond the routine and ordinary in life, and I think we were made this way. That's who we are. Okay, so I hope I'm not embarrassing myself, because you've probably recorded with a lot of people. Maybe you can't even think of them all. But last fall, we played a video in our church service, and you were one of 3 people in the credits. It was a YouTube video. Does that ring any bells at all?
I was in the credits.
There were 3 of you performing.
Was that the one with Heather?
Was I in drag?
No, it didn't show. I don't think it showed anybody. It was one of those videos where, the performers are not appearing. I think something like that.
I don't know. It sounds like maybe somebody used a song of mine, maybe, and put it over a video or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but all 3 of you were contributors, singers on this.
Right. Oh, was it maybe it was the song by The Many?
I think so.
The Many.
It was an Advent song.
Yes, that's right.
The whole world is waiting. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
The whole world is waiting. That's what it was. It was Advent, and it was beautiful. It really set the tone for our communion. Yeah.
Yeah. I was honored. I was honored to be invited onto that project. The Many, and Kate. I'm blanking on Kate's last name, but she wrote the song, and then The Many kind of took it and reimagined it and invited me to be part of it. So yeah, it was the 3 of us. We're kind of and actually Ben Grace was on that as well. He has the calendar years who helped produce it. So yeah, that was a beautiful song. I'm glad you got to hear that.
For that.
So tell us about your new album. What's it called? When is it coming out? What are the songs on it?
Some of that's still under embargo. So the album title I'm keeping close to the chest until I get to announce that myself.
Okay.
But it is. Here's what I can say about it. If there's a thesis, sentence to this album, it's this: I need a God whose love is bigger than mine. Like, if you are going to try and convince me that your God is worthy of worship, is worthy of my time, is worthy of my adoration, all of that, then I need to know that God knows how to love better than I do. And I've learned a lot about love in my 40 years. Um, I know how to love really well, I think, and I know how to even love a lot of my enemies really well. And I use that word really loosely. I don't actually look at anybody as an enemy, even somebody like Sean Foy. But people who oppose me, I can even love them. And here's the thing about the evangelical God right now: that God sucks at loving. He's so bad at it. There are so many conditions on his love that I don't have. There are so many ways in which his love is manipulative and uh, requires us to be a certain way or behave a certain way or do certain things in order to receive that love. I can love without doing that. So, I can't find the compelling case for the evangelical God anymore. And honestly, I think the only reason I ever did was because it's what I was raised in and the only thing I knew.
Right.
Once I started to be exposed to the world around me, the other ideas of who God is, it all unraveled pretty quickly once you get you understand that so much of the Bible has been abused and manipulated and twisted. So much of tradition is actually not tradition; it's new. Evangelicalism itself is what?
Yeah, not that old, right?
Not that
Ruby
old.
Sales, who is a civil rights activist and a womanist theologian, public theologian, she came to speak at our class the other night, and she made a comment. Ruby Sales.
Oh yeah, Ruby Sales.
Yeah, she's the reason that I write books that I write. But she made a comment, and it talked that there's so much power in the when you say to somebody, "You can't make me hate you," right? That's real, true, powerful love. That no matter what you do to me, you can't make me hate you, right?
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of that kind of ethos in what you're saying as well. You know what I mean? When you say like that, there is a God that I want a God who can love better than I love, right?
Yeah. Because otherwise it's not God. It's something else.
Yeah.
Right. Like that.
100%. It's a psychopath, just highly dysfunctional psychopathological God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
And so I think that's just kind of the baseline at this point, which it should always be. And but it's not. Like, we don't think of things in those terms in evangelicalism. We're not trained to. We're not brought up to ask those kinds of questions. And so yeah, I'm not really going after evangelicals with this record. I'm going after their God. Let's kill that God. Like, let's show how ineffective, powerless, and not even that, but like how brutal and cruel and undeserving of our worship that God is. Let's take that God down. And I love my friend Derek Webb says this all the time. He says sometimes you have to kill the thing that can be. If it can be killed, you have to kill it, so that if there's anything real, it can rise to take its place. And maybe there is, and maybe there isn't, but you won't know unless you chuck that ideology, that version of God first. So that's it. That's just a light little topic for a folk record.
Sure.
But that's what we're doing.
Amazing. Yeah. So I'm so curious to know how Flamy Grant was born.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. Forged in the fires of no. I was watching Drag Race one night in 2019 with my husband, and I didn't really get into drag until my 30s. Although one could argue that I was into drag as a toddler, because that's all I wanted to do, was get into my mom's makeup and her shoes and clothes. And then I learned real quickly that was not going to be accepted in my world and in my family. And so, you learn to conform. And so for 30 years, I conformed to the gender expectations that society had for me. But I started going to drag shows in San Diego, where I was living at the time, and just kind of fell in love with a couple queens there. And I was like, wow, this is such a magical art form. You can do so much with it. It's so versatile. And so I was watching Drag Race with my husband, and just turned to him because I was like, I don't have a drag name. Like I want a drag name. Do you have one? And he was like, of course I do. It's Amanda Do It. And so yeah, he had already thought about this. And I was like, well, I want one. And I love the names that are like, puns on a celebrities like Tina Burner and Shaka Convict and
So good.
Delta Work and those kinds of names. I just think they're fun and cute. And so I was like, well, I want that. But, my divas growing up were Christian musicians because that's all I was allowed to listen to. And of course, there is nobody, like there's only one Amy Grant. She's the
Right.
CCM superstar. And so I don't know, the name Flamy just kind of came to me and I said it out loud and my husband laughed. And I was like, well, okay, if he thinks it's funny, then I know he has none of the like evangelical background I have, no church trauma. I was like, if he thinks it's funny, then I know there's a generation of youth group kids who will love that. So
Yes.
I went that night and I like reserved the Instagram handle. Even though I was not doing drag, had no intentions of doing drag, certainly did not see a massive career shift in the second half of my life that was going to turn me into a drag musician full time. But that was the seed, that was the moment, and I did start experimenting with makeup a little bit, but I didn't really have time. Like who had the time in 2019 to do anything? We were all so busy, and I already had hobbies. I was already making music with another band, and I was a worship leader, and I had a full-time job, and I was like, I don't have time to do drag. But then the pandemic hit, and I did have the time. And so instead of doing sourdough starters or whatever, that's what I did with my pandemic. I watched a master's class of YouTube makeup tutorial videos, basically, and started live streaming with our housemates at the time were musicians. So Ben Grace, and we did live streaming every week, and I started showing up to those in drag. And yeah, before I knew it, I realized that I was doing this like thing that was healing me. It was inner child work for me. It was it gave me the ability to go back to the younger version of myself and say, all of the shame that was heaped on you for just following your natural instincts, your natural impulses.
Let me just affirm, and then you keep going, but let me just affirm that since 2020, we are so different. We are different people, as individuals, and of course that means collectively, but we're just different. And
Yeah.
you seem to just embody that, you represent that in your words just now.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was a big shift in our just collective consciousness. And in a lot of ways, right? I think that the shift put some people even more squarely rooted and clinging hardcore to their traditions and their inability to welcome change. Whereas
To be queer.
for a lot, yeah, to be queer, to be queered. And for a lot of us, it did very much the opposite, right? It kind of forced us into new patterns and forced us into new ways of seeing because we couldn't survive the way that we used to. And so yeah, it was realizing that work that I was doing for myself had the power to kind of also impact other people. I found that out through mostly online, just the things I would post, the music I would do online. The comments that would come back would be, wow, this makes me feel so seen and safe. And that was the shift for me. Once I realized that, I still hate using the word ministry, but it is. That's really what it is. It's a way that I can.
Can you go, going back to 2020, that transformative moment, can you go a little deeper as to what happened inside of you? I don't want to rush past that in case you feel obligated. If you don't, you can rush past it. But it just seems like something that we could like focus on for a moment.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, there were a lot of things that it did for me. I think the most important for me in my experience was that it gave me the courage and really the wherewithal, the ability to see beyond the gender role that I had been performing my entire life. I was raised and cultured male and masculine, and I spent years desperately trying to fulfill those expectations, whatever I perceived them to be, right? And it would shift depending on where I was. Like in church, there were ways to be male and masculine that were different from, outside of church and that kind of thing. But I was always chasing that because I felt like I had to fit into that and I needed to belong to that. And I just didn't see any other option for myself. And so I think drag opened those doors. And here's the thing, it like the fear is that, some of these things are like slippery slopes, right? You do one little thing, like, and then that's the fear that gets instilled in you. And it's like, it's going to lead to whatever. And it's true. It is a slippery slope. And the only thing that's not true is that what's waiting for you at the bottom is not despair and destruction and woe and sorrow. It's freedom and liberation and life and happiness. And these power structures that have just kept us, whether it's just like public shame around concepts of gender, whether it's specifically religious, religiously backed and theologically backed, and I'm using air quotes there because I don't actually believe that there's a legitimate way to back that using at least the Bible. But so it's powerful stuff, and it keeps us chasing things that we don't even want. I don't even want to be male. That's not what I wanted as a kid. I wanted to play. I wanted to be creative. I wanted to express myself in a wide variety of ways. And drag like kind of unlocked that thing that I had locked up for so long and gave me new language for my own gender expression and identity, and just freed me from the burden of trying to fit in.
Yeah. And I think I really believe in that. That's one of the gifts that drag has to offer the world, right? Is liberating men from the confines of toxic masculinity. And I want to delineate between masculinity and toxic masculinity, because one of the things that I am often accused of as a feminist and as, an ally is like, oh, you hate men. No, I don't hate men. I love men. I'm raising a man. I love men. But what I despise is the ways in which many men have been programmed and socialized into this construct that eliminates their ability to have a full human experience of full emotions, right? And to really to express themselves in however they want to feel, I saw a TikTok today of a man who's done a study on teenage boys, and he was just saying, repeating quotes that he had gotten from his research. And it was talking about how lonely teenage boys are and how emotions confuse them, and how one of them said they were expressing themselves or they were acting kind of goofy, and their sister said, oh, you're acting gay. And so he said, from now on, I'm going to act more masculine, right? What does that even mean, to act more masculine, right? And so I think that that's one of the ways that drag can really offer all of us liberation, right? Because when men are liberated from toxic masculinity, the rest of us get liberated too.
Yeah, it's so true. I have no notes, nothing to add. That's true.
You reminded me of, and Carrie knows this, but from the period of the spring of 2020 into the spring of 2021, I became aware of 11 people who came out, and most of them were trans. And one of them, those they were all in the U.S. except for one. I teach I have a relationship with St. Stephen's University in New Brunswick, Canada. And of course, classes were on Zoom at that time. And I was teaching a class, and someone actually came out at the end during the discussion period. They were leading worship at a church in town there where they were, and just said, 2 weeks ago, I stepped down from my position as a worship leader at my church because I was too conflicted. And then they went on to explain why, which is the fact that they did not fit in a gender category. And I just thought that was both horrible and beautiful at the same time, that they could do that in front of classmates, right?
Hmm.
But this says something about humanity's evolution because, there were a couple of people who went over and stood next to him and put their hands on their shoulder and just said, we're with you. I just thought it was a beautiful moment, but it
That's
also
great.
represented what we saw in that period. For some of us, it was not our gender identity or sexual orientation, but we were changed. We are so different if we allowed it to happen.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. That's beautiful.
So, have either of you seen the movie Poor Things?
Not yet, no.
Okay, maybe we
I
have to
saw
have
it
you
and
back
can't
after.
remember what it was about right now.
Oh, yeah, it's about it's like this acid trip of of this woman, this guy who makes a woman. He transplants.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he transplants a fetus's brain into its mother's dead body.
Hmm.
So it's kind of creepy. But it's a fascinating story of the ways of what could happen when a woman isn't templated with social codes and constructs, right? And who does she become in a world that has very patriarchal
Yeah.
norms of ownership and agency over women's bodies.
Mm.
And what's interesting and what's fascinating about it is that she kind of does her own thing and becomes super empowered, and all of the men adore, she's breaking hearts left and right because all of these men are falling in love with her because she is being just her most authentic self, because she has no idea about any of these social constructs that she's supposed to be adhering to, which I thought it was kind of ironic, So I think that speaks to the idea of freedom. And again, I bring that back to your music, Flamy, that I think your music offers something of freedom to everyone who listens. And I think that's just it's such a beautiful gift to the world. And doing it in drag is even more. It's like the fact that it's coming from a drag queen makes it even more liberative in my mind.
Thank you very much. That's very gratifying to hear. And that's exactly the hope. That's exactly the hope for it. So
Amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you for you mentioned earlier that people in your circles stick around for, that's not the word that you used, but stay around in the very
persevere,
difficult. Yeah, and they're doing it for other people, really, to say, you know what, we are legitimate human beings and we need to speak up for one another. I love that.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Well, how can people find you, Flamy? How can people find your work?
Oh,
and if you had another thought in response to what David just said, please don't let me cut you off.
Did I have more to say? I think just that, the this faux panic that the far right has stirred up around, protect the children. It's all about the children. And without acknowledging the truth that we were all children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every queer person was once a queer child, and there will always be more queer children. And so these laws that are passing, the anger and the aggression that we see in the social sphere, I mean, the ones who are bearing the brunt of that are queer kids. And so they're the ones we're not protecting. It is actually harming children, all of this. And we see that with I don't want to invoke names or that sort of thing, but there are people who have died very publicly very recently as a result of the legislation that's affecting schools, that's affecting bathrooms, it's affecting libraries, all of it. It has a very real impact on actual living, breathing children, and we are not protecting those children, and that's what we have to be better at. So, so we have to expose that folly and that fallacy.
Thank you.
Anyway, where to
Thank
find
you.
me?
Yes, where to
I'm
find you.
I'm super easy to find. I'm the only Flamy Grant out there. And so all you have to do is Google that or go to flamygrant.com. My handle on all the social medias is at Flamy Grant. And I am touring all year. I'm kind of all over the country. And so just sign up for my newsletter. That's the easiest way to make sure you don't miss when I come to your town. And
Awesome.
yeah, lots of shows
And
ahead. So
and the new album, does it have a release date yet?
not a specific one, but I am aiming for like end of August, maybe first week of September. So yeah,
Okay.
keep your eyes peeled for that. I will obviously be
Awesome.
shouting it from the rooftops once I'm ready to kind of unveil these
Yes.
songs and roll out the new record. So yeah.
I can't wait. Awesome. Well, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today, Flamy.
Yes.
And
Thank y'all
have
for
a
having me.
wonderful,
It's
beautiful
been an
day.
honor. Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Hey,
Awesome.
what do you think about, before we go, if you said a prayer for all the 9-year-old Flamies out there, or 14-year-old Flamies?
Yeah. I'll say it this way, if I can. I'll say that, yeah, if you're listening to this and you don't know what your future looks like, or you have confusion around who you are and your place in the world, and it has to do with the way you express yourself, your gender, who you think you might love, who you think you might be attracted to. And if it's really hard to talk about those things in your circumstances because maybe your family doesn't get it, maybe your church is not an affirming place for you, I just want you to know that there are so many of us out here waiting to hold you, okay? Waiting to welcome you into spaces where you are seen for exactly who you are, where you are celebrated for exactly who you are. This time that you're in is temporary and it's hard, and I know that, but it is temporary, okay? And you will see the other side of it, and life will be joyful. It will be beautiful. You will have so many friends. You will have so many people who love you, and you are going to make the world a better place. So persevere and persist and reach out. Find the people in your community who you can trust, because they are there, okay? We love you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Have a beautiful day, both of you.
Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you so much for being here today. We are people who have left behind performance-based religion and the shame that comes with it. Maybe you have a personal liberation story to tell, and we want to know about it. Please contact us on Twitter at GodIsNotAnAsshole, or text 805-703-8393, because the world needs to know that God is not an asshole. The show's music is composed by Christian Moore, show art created by Evan Kerr, and the episodes are produced by Josh Perez.